Basically, the agreement was the first. It was notable because it pledged to sort of reduce all greenhouse gas emissions, including methane, which comes from coal. That's pretty big from China, which is continuing to bring new coal plants online. Mm-hmm. But, in sort of the classic rhetoric that we've seen from them, the language of the agreement states that they will work to set a date sometime in the future to begin phasing them out. So it doesn't actually set a target. This is sort of classic behavior from them. And, critics say that it will just in the near term, they're going to continue to build up their coal capacity and then sort of plateau it through 2060.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by energy and environment reporter Breanne Deppisch. Breanne, believe it or not, the holidays are coming up.
Believe it or not, it's a surprise to some of us.
It's a surprise to some. And so you see a lot of vehicle rentals happening this time of year. People travel. Mm-hmm. But some people are getting a little bit of a surprise. And it's not just that the Thanksgiving is coming, but they're not getting quite the vehicle that they're expecting. Talk a little bit about that.
That's true, Jim. It's not just a Thanksgiving surprise, but they are finding increasingly, this is a phenomenon that's happening across the U.S. Drivers are really pre-booking their vehicles online through rental companies. Avis, Hertz, the usual suspects. Most of these folks, use the option. They go for the standard option or the manager's special. Mm-hmm. They arrive, and now that these rental companies are sort of trying to electrify their fleet, an increasing number of drivers are actually being handed the keys to an electric vehicle, many of whom who have never driven one before. Sure. They don't know how to charge them. Right. They don't know that not all electric vehicles use the same charger. So I spoke to a couple. Pretty big problem. Yeah, it is a pretty big problem. I spoke to a couple people, and the anecdotes I heard were pretty shocking. One guy was forced to, I think he drove around for a couple hours through Minnesota on a business trip. This was a guy who owns a plug-in hybrid at home. He was, no stranger to the EVs. He wasn't expecting to get one, but he was sort of confident in his ability to use one on this business trip. Suffice it to say, after days and multiple failed attempts to charge at different places, he ended up in the parking lot of a dealership where there was just a single EV charger compatible with his vehicle, and he was there until late into the night and after the dealership had closed.
Wow.
So yeah,
that really hurts.
Yeah. Oh, haha, yes. And then others who have tried to push back, and they are like, no, I want the gas-powered vehicle. Some have been forced to wait for a couple hours. Some have been told, and these are at major airports, that there's only one left. One guy was forced to drive a large minivan because that was the only gas vehicle that they had still in stock. It's an interesting trend, and I think it's sort of growing pains associated with the EV industry itself and the lack of public charging infrastructure.
So Biden and Xi met, and while a lot of the focus has been on human rights and Taiwan and trade, there's clearly a lot of climate objectives that are also on the table with regard to our relationship with China. Were there any big breakouts on those issues from this meeting?
It's funny you mention that. There were a couple. They announced they pledged to actually strengthen their climate cooperation which was a pretty big achievement in and of itself. Efforts had basically stalled following Nancy Pelosi's trip to Taiwan last year. And so they revived that working group and some of their joint relationship efforts. Although, I spoke to a couple folks who described this as just more of the same from China, who basically the agreement was the first. It was notable because it pledged to sort of reduce all greenhouse gas emissions, including methane, which comes from coal. That's pretty big from China, which is continuing to bring new coal plants online. But, in sort of the classic rhetoric that we've seen from them, the language of the agreement states that they will work to set a date sometime in the future to begin phasing them out. So it doesn't actually set a target. This is sort of classic behavior from them. And, critics say that it will just in the near term, they're going to continue to build up their coal capacity and then sort of plateau it through 2060.
So we've also seen a lot of cooperation among European allies and others in terms of trying to prevent Russia from using oil money to fund its ongoing war in Ukraine. Have there been any new developments on that front?
There have been. Actually, the Treasury Department announced they sanctioned 3 different entities, all based in the UAE, that were ferrying Russian oil above the capped price. They were using U.S. shipping services, which, is obviously violates the terms of the cap, which look to limit Putin's war chest and sort of cut into their fossil fuel revenue. This is interesting because the EU is also weighing a new sanctions package that would set its own stricter enforcement measures, including actually making Denmark the authority, sort of giving them monitoring authority in this waypoint by which Russia transports a lot of its oil onto global markets. So basically, they would be able to come aboard any vessel that is shipping Russian oil, inspect it, and sort of see whether or not they are in fact complying with the cap. There have been assessments that have shown the lion's share of Russian oil is not being sold in accordance with the cap. So this is something that Western leaders we're sort of seeing some forceful action behind for the first time in basically the year since leaders passed it.
Well, that's an interesting development. Thank you, Breanne.
Thank you.
Get started on that Christmas shopping. Don't let it surprise you.
I will.
You can read Breanne and subscribe to our Daily on Energy newsletter at washingtonexaminer.com.